Joining me now is Louisiana Congressman Troy Carter, and thank you for being with us today. Congressman, let's start with this. President Biden signed the debt ceiling bill yesterday, avoiding a default. You spent some time on the House floor urging your Republican colleagues to pass a deal. Are you happy with what Congress and the White House settled on?
Rev, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you. And I will tell you, what would have made us happy would have had the opportunity to vote for a clean debt bill, just like we did 3 times under Trump administrations, just like it was done multiple times with previous administrations, without fanfare, without political jockeying. Unfortunately, we had to do all of that. And the American people were held hostage. The American people and the full faith and credit of the United States was challenged for nothing more than pure politics. Having said that, Shalonda Young, the budget director, the president of the United States and his team did an incredible job of saving what could have been a catastrophic default on our country, protecting Americans, protecting our environmental gains, protecting the bipartisan infrastructure bill, protecting Medicaid, Medicare, protecting the environmental gains that we made in places where we've had historic deficiencies with environmental justice. So this is as much a win as you can possibly get in an exercise that should have never, ever happened.
Now that the debt ceiling drama is sorted out, speaking as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, what are your goals for the remainder of this legislative session?
Well, we have lots of work to do. We still have to go through the appropriations process, even though the debt ceiling has been settled. We avoided a catastrophic default, but we still have to go and dive into the numbers. So our mission is still clear: to make sure that we minimize the pain that this senseless exercise may cause Americans throughout our country. Also, making sure that we are continuing to fight for voting rights. Who would think that in 2023 we'd still be having this discussion? We'll continue to fight to make sure that African Americans are safe to drive and live freely without fear of being abused by a rogue police officer. So we'll continue to fight for the George Floyd Policing Act. We'll continue to fight to make sure that people have access to the ballot box without any fear or danger, or without having to wonder if their votes are going to be properly counted. We're going to continue to fight to get additional legislative seats, like in my home state of Louisiana, where clearly the numbers suggest that we should have 2 African Americans in a state that is better than 33% African American, yet we only have 1.
Right.
I am the sole Democrat, and we deserve 2.
And clearly the demographics show there should be 2 seats in Louisiana, and that is the case in other states. But switching gears, on Thursday, Vice President Kamala Harris announced the Biden administration is developing a rule to tackle racial bias in home valuation. It's part of an ongoing effort by the White House to make home ownership easier for African Americans and other communities of color. But it has come at a time when the administration is reportedly elevating the vice president's profile as a way to show Americans her leadership ability ahead of the 2024 election. Are you encouraged by these efforts?
I'm encouraged by all of the work of our vice president. I think she's done an incredible job. I think there's those isms that are out there that causes people to view her efforts in a lens that is unfair. But I will tell you that our vice president has done a phenomenal job. She's been a great partner for the president. She's been a great partner for America. And I think the efforts that she's taking to once again address those disparities that happen in our community. We know that disproportionately racism in financial systems are real. We see them every day. And I'm proud to see that our vice president is tackling yet another substantive issue to address the racism, the financial disparities, and the need for our community to have strong leadership, and showing this from a Black female who happens to be an outstanding vice president is something that we're all very proud of.
Yeah, because when you look at the data, Black home ownership has actually gone down since the 63 March on Washington. We're doing one, as you know, this year. And it's very important what she's announced this week. But before I let you go, I noticed a report this week that your neighboring state of Mississippi still has 32 school districts under federal desegregation orders, according to the Department of Justice. DOJ officials say they are still fighting to fulfill the promise of Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court ruling banning segregation in schools nearly 70 years ago. I find it interesting that while some of your Republican colleagues are complaining about so-called critical race theory, which isn't even taught in elementary or high schools, and yet they continue to turn a blind eye to real-life evidence of discrimination. Your reaction, Congressman?
It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous and unacceptable. And the American people, Republican and Democrat, should see through this. The reality that here we are, nearly 70 years to the day, Board v. Brown of Board versus Brown of
Brown versus the
Board of Brown v. Board of Education.
Right.
Nearly 70 years to the day, we see ourselves in a situation where we're still dealing with the level of discrimination and hatred and hate speak. Across our country, we see it. And we look at our neighboring state of Mississippi, 32 cases where discrimination is still an issue. Unacceptable while we attempt to turn the clock back on history and things that we know to have happened, like slavery. You may not like the effects of having to see what your forefathers did, but you have to recognize that it happened. And if we're ever going to make sure it doesn't happen again, we have to teach it. And here we are, nearly 70 years later. Brown v. Board of Education is something that was a historic landmark case. Yet in Mississippi, we're still battling to enforce it. And you ask how I feel, sir? Embarrassed, disrespected, and outraged, as every American should be. And we look at the level of hate that our MAGA Republicans often try to pass forward. Republicans and Democrats alike, if you love our country and you love fairness and justice, you should be equally as angered by the practices that we see, and we should all act out. And that's what we'll do to make sure the Congressional Black Caucus is front and center, providing resources and enlisting the support of people all over the world to be a part of the change that we desperately need in America, and confident that we'll get it.
Thank you, as always, Congressman Troy Carter of Louisiana, for joining us again.